Welcome, friends, to the Grieving Nurse podcast. And this episode, we're going to talk about when you're consumed with the death, especially if it was a sudden death and unexpected. And then once you start to come out of that fog, when you're all enveloped in that, like, what can you do? So, welcome back, friends. And I just want to invite you, first and foremost, again, to my Catholic grief group. And we are going to start again mid-July. I will keep you posted on the exact date. We are done with the June one, or we've got that filled. So we're going to be working on the July one next. So just want to inform you of that, where it's just a place where you can come and share and be open about your experience with death and vulnerable and just have a place to lean on other people. So it's just a really beautiful space. And so I invite you to that. You can go to catholicgriefcoach.com to check out more information on that. Now, I was coaching somebody today who they had recently lost a loved one, and it was a friend's husband, and it was unexpected. They were quite young, for the most part, pretty healthy. And so when death, especially, is unexpected, you get thrown into this fog, like this brain fog, that's hard to get out of. And it feels all consuming because, for one, it's just a shock to your system. And so that's your body's natural way of coping with that, right? And protecting you from all that angst and emotions and just overwhelm, right? Like the trauma of the experience. It puts you in like this fog where you push out other emotions or feelings, or you can, and then you just try to focus on getting through the day, right? Like you try to focus on not feeling anything. You try to focus on just getting through the task at hand. And I would say it feels like a numb feeling almost, or you're hoping for a numb feeling because anytime that the sadness or the overwhelm it creeps in, it's almost like, oh, I gotta push up because I can't deal with that right now. I know when my mom died, again, it was very sudden, it's very unexpected, very tragic, and I told myself a lot, I can't deal with this right now. And I still did the day-to-day things, right? My kids, I did the bedtime routine. I got them fed. We did all the funeral arrangements, and my mom had a lot of things pre-planned. So that was very helpful. But you have to meet with like the priest and met with the funeral home, and we were sending out messages to people about like what time things were. And there's just those just kind of office tasks that need to be done around when somebody dies, and then meeting with lawyers and talking about estate and all that stuff, right? And a lot of the time I did that, but when the emotions would come into it, when I would start to feel that sadness, the despair, just a crushing like grief, right? Like just really missing both my parents, I would push it away say, oh, I can't deal with that right now, right? Like that was a lot of times my thought was, I can't deal with this right now. And it would make me feel then numb again, which is what I was aiming for. And it kept me in a state of almost denial or disbelief in a way, right? Like I knew mentally, I knew my mom had died, but emotionally it kept me in that numbness, that disbelief. So if I don't have to think about it, I really don't have to acknowledge it. And again, this is a normal response because our body wants to protect us, our mind wants to protect us, and going through that and bringing up those emotions feels very unsafe. It feels like you're going to go through all of that again. And so once we got through like the initial couple weeks, right, of like planning the funeral, writing the obituary, notifying relatives. We couldn't bury my mom right away because it was winter, and so we had to wait till the spring. So like with that part, we didn't have to deal with right away, but we dealt with like the initial things. And once we started kind of coming out of that, right, like those tasks were done and completed, then it was almost like a time and place for my mind, my body to be like, okay, all right, like there's nothing left to do. I'm just like doing the day-to-day things. And I even wrote a lot of the thank you cards for the funeral and things like because I brought them home with me and I was like, right, like I'll take care of this stuff. So I did a lot of those. But once those were done, it was just like, oh, now what? Like all my tasks for the present moment are completed. Now what? Now what am I going to use to distract myself? And a lot, like for me, it did take me a while to then kind of be like, okay, like what do I want to focus on? Because I do think that death in its own way kind of gives us that beautiful perspective of life is short, life is fleeting. And so, how do I want to spend my time? And so, again, for me, it was kind of odd circumstances because then shortly after that, like COVID hit. And so there was a lot of changes in my job and a lot of things got moved around. I was just like, yeah, I would rather spend time with my children than go to this job that if I'm there or not, like they'll replace me, they'll hire somebody else. So for me, it just gave me that clarity of, and I asked myself the question of what do I want to spend my time doing? Because life is short, right? Like at that point in time, I had lived about half of the life that my mom had already lived, and it just was very alarming to me that I could be halfway through my life already. And like, what have I done? What have I accomplished? And so I think again that those are good things to reflect on. And I think the Catholic Church in its beauty like has us reflecting on that every November and even Lent, right? Like you are dust and dust you shall return, or whatever the words are. Um, so I do think like the church in its goodness, like we are supposed to do that, right? We're supposed to reflect on that because it keeps our eyes towards heaven and what we're doing with our lives and are we doing what God is asking us to? And so I think that after you kind of come through the fog, and that is what I would encourage you guys to start asking yourselves. And even if you're, a few months removed from the funeral or years, like I always think that's a good question to ask is what is God calling me to? Because again, we go through seasons of life where right now I'm a life coach. 5 years ago, I was a nurse. I mean, I'm still a nurse, but I don't practice as a nurse. So I think like God is calling us sometimes to different things in our lives at different times. And so just always going back to that and being aware of what is God calling me to. And I do think like when somebody dies, we have like that fresh perspective of, wow, life is short. I want to live the best life that God has put me on this earth to live. So what is he calling me to that I am not doing or I'm not making strides towards? And so starting with that question and then kind of picking one thing, right? And one thing that will make the most impact on where you're at currently in your life. And so for example, so when I was 5 years ago, I guess it's almost six now, um, after my parents died, I guess it would be 5 years because it'd be like that following year, right? Came out like dad died, then mom died about 4 months later. Then I found out about financial infidelity in my marriage. So that first year was pretty stressful with focusing on marriage issues. So for me in that time, I would say like my big focus was working through my marriage. But I also knew part of that was my health and weight loss journey because I had had six babies and I had put on a lot of weight from those pregnancies over the years. And so for me, at that moment in time, yes, focusing on my marriage, but I also knew that if I put more self-care into myself, into my health, into my where I'm at emotionally, mentally, like that's going to make major strides in my marriage, in my parenting, in my physical wellness, right? So for me, it was like my emotional and mental well-being, which kind of I found paired with my weight at the time. So what is it that for you right in this moment, if you could change one thing, what would have the greatest impact on your life? So maybe for you, it's your prayer life. Maybe you're like, no, like I felt God like nudging me, asking me to pray more, really dedicate time to Him. So maybe that's the one thing that if you changed, it would roll over into everything in your life. Maybe it is your health and weight loss journey. You're like, yeah, if I was spending all day thinking about food, I have so much more mental energy for the loved ones in my life and for myself. Maybe it's alcohol or some other form of like social media addiction or something that's like drawing you away from being present. Maybe it is you want to focus on your relationships more. Maybe after the death of this loved one, like relationships shift, like they change, and sometimes they take more work to grow. And so if you want to grow that relationship, maybe that's what you need to focus on. So maybe it might be like with siblings, it might be with your parents or a living parent, or maybe with your spouse or with your children. Like what maybe you want to put that into relationships. And from that, then, when you are working through those things, like to get you to the next step of it, right? I like to tell myself, I am learning to become a woman who longs for prayer time in her day. I'm becoming a woman who loves to pray. I'm becoming a woman who can't be without those 10 minutes of the day with God, right? I'm becoming a woman who wants to choose her health over the brownie. I'm becoming a woman who wants a great relationship with my husband, right? So you can just put in what it is that you're reaching towards, what your goal is, and start like leaving yourself like little notes places or just repeating that throughout the day is a great place to start. And then, two, this should have been the first step. I should have put this in first, but always ask God, right? Like, ask our Lord, what is it that you want me to focus on first? What is it that would make the most impact in my life that you're calling me to? So, and I know, like, for me, it was, I needed to, again, get right mentally. And for me, it looked like, hey, if I lose weight, right? But what I learned along the way was like, oh my gosh, like, I really am lacking self-love after having baby after baby after baby and working all the time, like I've lost sight of loving myself where I am. So that's what I was working on. So I hope that this was helpful. Again, if you guys ever need anything, feel free to email me at catholicgriefcoach@outlook.com. And again, go to catholicgriefcoach.com to look for the next grief group that will be starting in July. And I am praying for you guys, and I hope you have the very best possible day that you can. God bless.